Hello everyone and welcome to a really wonderful game from yesterday's round 8 of the European Championship. It's Austrian Grandmaster 24-year-old Valentin Dragnev versus the legend himself, Vasyl Ivanchuk. This game is really weird. One of the players resigns in a position where you really should not resign. Or maybe you should resign. Maybe it's just so complicated that even an engine doesn't understand that you should resign. But you're going to see what I mean by this after a few moves. So Valentin has the white pieces and he opens with e4. We have knight pawn to c5, knight f3, we have d6 and now d4, going for the Sicilian defense. And also yesterday you guys, some of you guys got really worked up about me saying that e4, c5, d4 is the Smith-Morra gambit. Obviously, yeah, after captures you have to play c3 for it to be the Smith-Morra gambit. It's just that when I make videos I use chess.com's opening explorer, and as soon as you hit e4, c5 and d4, the opening explorer says that it's the Smith-Morra gambit. So it wasn't like a way that I was trying to deceive you or anything. It seems that I trust the opening explorer too much, so sorry about that. But I can see that a lot of you were very hurt in the comments, so yeah, should have definitely checked that twice. But getting back to the game, c captures on d4, knight captures, we have knight to f6, knight to c3 and a6. Vasyl goes for the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian. We have bishop to e3 by Valentin, the English attack against the Najdorf, pawn to e5, and now knight to f3. The other retreats are also possible. You could also go back to e2 to b3. Knight to f3 here, we have queen to c7, and now bishop to e2. So all very standard stuff. Bishop e7, we have pawn to a4, preparing to grab more space with pawn to a5, bishop to e6, and now castles by Valentin. Knight b to d7, knight to g5, and now there is a game where castles was played. Here we have bishop to c4 by Vasyl, and it is now, as of move 11, that we have a completely new game. So here a4, a5, grabbing more space on the queen side, castles, and now bishop captures on c4. Ivanchuk recaptures. We have rook to a4 now, attacking the black queen. Queen back to c6. We have knight back to f3, and now rook 8 to c8. And this is a very good setup for black because now the knight cannot move as the c2 pawn will hang. We have queen to d3, preparing to bring the other rook into the game, rook f to d8, and now rook to d1. So it's a pretty standard Sicilian position where black is controlling the knight, you cannot move it, and white is really controlling that d5 square. And here we have pawn to h6 and now pawn to h3, and Chucky goes for knight to f8. Now, if you, it really makes, it's hard to say if it makes sense, but knight to c5, it's very easy to understand why one would want to play such a move. You attack the queen and the rook, and now you force bishop captures on c5. And if pawn captures, okay, now you have to move the queen e2, now you trade queens, and you win the d file for the black rook. Now, it's not spectacular. Black still has the weak c5 and the weak e5 pawns, but it is possible to play this. However, similar thing has happened in the game. Knight to f8, we have knight to h4 now, going after that f5 square, queen to d7, and now pawn to b3. Now the knight can move, you don't have to worry about the rook hanging. Knight to e6, and now knight to f5. We have bishop to f8 now, controlling the knight as best as possible, because you really should worry about some sort of a kingside attack happening here. And now knight to d5. Now it's possible to play this as the c2 pawn is not hanging. So knight captures, e captures, and knight to c5. We get a similar position to what we've discussed. Bishop captures, you have to take. Rook captures on c5 now, and rook to e1. And here we have pawn to g6. Also, it's possible to just play queen to c7. It seems that Chucky didn't realize that he could just win a pawn here. But okay, you do win a pawn, but you will allow an attack, because it's very easy for the rook to get into the attack. The other rook is coming into the attack. The queen is coming into the attack. So maybe he just decided that it's not worth grabbing a pawn. He played g6, attacks the knight. Rook to g4, now pins the g-pawn. We have rook to e8, and now rook to e3. Also, it was maybe just b4 here. I know I always say that b4 is very important, but here you really should play it, because your a5 pawn will no longer be hanging. You don't waste time for b4, because you also attack the rook, and there's nothing to worry about. So throwing in b4 here does make sense. But here we have rook to e3, and now comes rook c back to c8, and this is just deciding to leave the pawn alone. Capturing the pawn does seem like a good idea, but then look at this, something like rook e to g3, and even if rook to a1 check, king to h2, and e4, just giving back this pawn to stop the attack, at least for a little bit. Let's say rook captures, queen captures, and king to h7. It's still not very pleasant. The knight will come to d4, and now look at this, bishop g7, knight to e6, and it's not easy to withstand this attack. F captures on e6, rook captures, and now threatening all sorts of nasty discoveries. If bishop e5 check, you can play rook to g3, opening up a discovery. If king to h8, even pawn to f4, kicks away the bishop, bishop moves, d captures on e6, and it's just a very, very annoying position to have with black. Only perfect play will save you from losing this game. So instead, he goes back, rook back to c8, and now we have knight to g3. It's hard to say whether you should keep the knight there or maybe try something else, but he decides to remaneuver the knight. Bishop g7, knight to e2, pawn to h5, and now rook back to a4. We have pawn to f5. Now it's Vasyl who goes for the attack. Queen back to d1, and now bishop to h6. Attacks the rook, rook to g3, and now just king to h7. We have pawn to c4, and now rook to c5. Rook to a2, and now queen to d8. You have to defend the... or rather, you have to go after the a5 pawn, and white has to defend it. Queen to e1. We have pawn to h4 now. Makes this rook move from such an active square. Rook to d3, and now pawn to e4. We have rook back to d1, and now even pawn to e3. So it seems like Vasyl's attack is really coming through. Pawn to f3, and now pawn to b5. We have a captures on b6 en passant. Queen captures, and now rook to a3, defending the pawn. Not the most active square for the rook, but you have to do something. Although you would much rather play something like rook to b2, but then you have to worry if rook captures, and c4 is an option. So maybe a passive square like a3 is better. So bishop to g5 here. Now the bishop is being remaneuvered over to this diagonal. Rook d to e1, rook d to a1, doubling up on the a file, and now bishop to f6, going after the rook. Here, maybe safer was just a5, and then if white captures, you can just trade, for example, captures, and then pick up the b3 pawn. But in the game, Vasyl decided to play bishop f6. He attacked the rook, but now just rook captures on a6. Queen captures on b3, and now rook captures on d6, sacrificing the exchange on a1. You don't have to do this. You could also just play rook to b1, attack the queen, and only when the queen captures, now play rook captures on d6, which that does make it a bit hard for black to defend, because you don't have any pawns on the 7th rank. Also, the back rank is open for attack, so it would be hard. Like bishop to e7 seems to be the only move that holds, but even this, look at this, rook to d7, you have to move the king, rook to b6. It doesn't seem like a position that's very easy to hold here. The bishop always has to keep an eye on the h4 pawn, because then the queen comes into the game. Very, very hard to hold. But in the game, rook captures on d6 was played. He sacrificed the exchange. Bishop captures on a1. We have queen captures, and now rook to c7, taking care of the 7th rank, so you don't get checked. Queen to f6, now threatening queen captures on g6, and rook to g7, defending. We have queen captures on h4 with check, king to g8, and now rook to d8, forcing a trade because you don't have time for anything else. Otherwise, rook captures on d8, on e8. So rook captures on d8, queen captures with check, king to h7, and now queen to h4 with check, king to g8. And here it almost seemed like there was going to be a repetition: king h7, queen to h4 check, king to g8. But now comes king to h2. Valentin wants to continue the game, and he wants to push this for a win. Even though he's down the exchange, he does have the 2 connected pass pawns, and the Vasyl's passed e pawn is nicely blockaded by the knight. So queen d1, Vasyl goes after the knight, queen back to d8 with check, king h7, queen to f6 now. very tricky move because what do you play here? It seems like you could capture the knight and then it's just a draw. For example, queen captures here, and then you really don't have anything better. Queen to h4 check, king to g8, queen to d8 with check, king to h7, and now you just well, force a draw. But in the game, queen to b3 was played, and now comes queen to d4, and it was in this position on move 55 that Vasyl Ivanchuk resigned the game, as there seems to be nothing more to be done here. But it's actually not that bad of a position. Here he resigned, but just in case, feel free to pause the video here and try to find, if there was a move, what would you play here with black, and how would you survive this position? Well, I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this incredible defensive idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to rook to d7. If any of you found this move, you are an incredibly strong player. Even if you don't think you are, and even if your rating doesn't reflect, you definitely have potential to become one. Now, in order to understand rook to d7, and also one thing very important here in the position where Ivanchuk resigned, Valentin had some 5 minutes on the clock. Vasyl had over 30 minutes on the clock. So also something very important to consider, because he could have spent more time analyzing this. I don't know how much time he actually spent here before he resigned. But the problem is if you play something like queen to c2, which seems like the way to go, because you go after the knight, it doesn't really work. Knight f4, and now if pawn to e2, just knight e6, you threaten checkmate. And now, let's say you play rook f7, now comes knight to g5 check, and it's still not, it's not completely lost. I mean, you can still, you do have the two connected pass pawns. But now queen e3 goes after check, and then you want to capture the rook, let's say rook to b7, now pawn to c5. And now it does seem like you will not be able to stop those pawns, and you never have time to play e1. It's just very tricky to play this. But that's not really the point. The point is, after this a knight to e6 move, you will not play rook to f7. The only move to actually hold is like rook to b7, but even then it's insufficient. Rook to h4 check, king to g8, and now queen to h6 with check. You go after the pawn here, and now you cannot defend, because if pawn to f4, which makes sense, you guard the g6 pawn, just a nice check, king h7, and knight to g5 will be checkmate. And the other thing, if pawn to g5, which sort of creates an escape route for the king, now you just play queen captures on g5, king h7, and pawn to f4. And now after e1 queen, it seems like, okay, now black has two queens and the rook. It's still completely winning for white. Queen to h5 check, king to g8. Now you play queen to g6 with check. You cannot block with the rook. If rook to g7, you can just capture. So you have to play king h8. It's the only other move. Now queen to e8 with check, king to h7, and now the beautiful knight to g5 check will win the queen on e1. So you're going to have to move king h6. Queen captures on e1, and now white is just up to too many pawns. Queen captures here. You're going to play queen to e6 check, king g7, queen captures on f5. 4 pawns up. Of course, that's much better than having a rook for a knight. So that's why it doesn't work. And that's probably why Vasyl resigned, and he thought that none of the positions that occur are even possible to play, let alone hold. The problem is, after rook to d7, the move that Vasyl probably moved in his calculation, there's not all that much to try here for white. I wanted to make sure, because I know how strong Vasyl is, and I know how strong his intuition is, and a lot of times if you just ask the engine, Vasyl will be stronger than an engine. So I allowed the engine to crunch the numbers up until depth like 50. 55, and it still decided that the position is a draw. So either Vasyl is that much stronger than an engine and he could see a forced win here for white, or we simply have to trust the engine. But the problem is now, after rook to d7, the knight f4 idea no longer works. This only works if the queen moves away from the b file. Here, you can just block with queen to b8. And now there's no good way to continue. If you go back with the king, then you just have a nice perpetual with queen b2 check, queen to a2 check, and you continue checking the white king. If you play g3, then you've opened up the second rank. And now it really doesn't matter. Now, let's say just queen to a7, you offer a queen trade. If you trade queens, it's a draw, so white will have to play something, and then just queen to a2 with check, and there's just no good way to play this. Even the c4 pawn might fall. So it's not possible to play it like this. So what you would have to do after rook to d7, there's only one line that allows the whites to sort of have an edge, and that is pawn to d6. That's the point. You can't play pawn to c5. Also, why rook to d7 is so strong, because it guards it guards from c5. The d5 pawn will fall. So here you have to play d6, but now comes queen a2, goes after the knight, and now pawn to c5, the only line that works for white. Now queen captures on e2, c6, the two connected passed pawns are of course much stronger than the rook, so you have to give up the rook. Queen captures, and now queen to c4. You open up now the possibility of advancing the e pawn to becoming a queen. Queen to e7 with check. It doesn't matter if you push, black just pushes. So here you can play queen e7 check to sort of control the e file, but it doesn't matter. You're going to move the king h8, and now it doesn't matter how you play this. I've tried it many different ways. Basically, you're going to have to trade, and it always ends up like this. Doesn't matter which way you try, you will always end up with 3 against 2, and it's just going to be very, very hard to try and push this for a win, because after this check, let's say king to g8, there's no good way to do this. The queen, after capturing on c6, also guards the g6 pawn, and the queen alone cannot threaten the black king. Yes, it's up a pawn, and yes, Steinitz said once that queen's endgames, if you're up a pawn, you're winning the game. But here, when they're on the same side of the board, it's just not going to be possible. At some point, you will have to advance that g pawn, and that will just allow black to also start checking you, and there's just no way to actually win this. Of course, you can push this, and the chances are your opponent will make a mistake, and you actually will win the game. But with perfect play, that's not really the case. So that's why I really wondered after queen to d4 on move 55, did Vasyl Ivanchuk resign the game because this is truly lost, or because he just didn't find rook to d7? I guess we'll never know, because we all know how strong Vasyl is. So there you have it. Make your own conclusion about this one. Especially since he was up so much on the clock, it seems like a very premature resignation. But yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. A lot of very cool lines here, especially this final position. I would like to thank Seshadri Rajan, Lobo, Ravishing Reptiles YouTube, Joel Wildiers, and Ryan Kavanaugh for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world, like the European Individual Championship. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.